They won the American League. They returned to the World Series. They spent like a big market team. And even so, they managed to badly mess up on a detail that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. Because while Toronto Blue Jays fans were still digesting a tight 7-game loss to the Dodgers, the front office managed to turn a simple behind-the-scenes transition into yet another reason for public criticism. This isn't about losing Don Mattingly. It's about how they lost Don Mattingly. And that says more about the Blue Jays' internal moment than any multi-million-dollar contract announced this offseason. Let's get straight to the point. Toronto is coming off one of the best seasons in its recent history. There were 94 wins, an American League East title after a decade-long wait, and a run that took the team to the World Series for the first time since 1993. John Schneider went from a questioned manager to the leader of a pennant-winning club. The roster responded. The city bought in. The loss to the Los Angeles Dodgers hurt, of course. Especially in 7 games. Especially watching the rival repeat as champions. But no serious person treats an American League title as a failure. And Ross Atkins' response was clear. Accelerate. The Blue Jays' offseason was aggressive. Dylan Cease arrived on a 7-year, $210 million contract to anchor the rotation. Kazuma Okamoto came over from Japan with the status of a ready-made bet, not a long-term project. Tyler Rogers strengthened the bullpen with the kind of money spent by a team that believes it's one step away from the trophy. Toronto acted like a real contender. But then comes the part nobody likes to discuss when the subject is a winning team: the backstage. While the spotlight was on contracts and dollar figures, a historic name was quietly heading out the back door. Don Mattingly, a baseball legend, a respected figure in any clubhouse. And over the last 3 years, a quiet but influential presence on the Blue Jays coaching staff. Mattingly didn't leave angry. He didn't leave under pressure. He didn't leave chasing a promotion. He left for something absurdly simple. He wanted to work with his son. Preston Mattingly is the general manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. And Don made it clear to Toronto, early in the offseason, that he wanted to step away from the bench coach role to join the Philadelphia organization. Nothing shady. Nothing done behind anyone's back. And here's where the noise started. According to reports from Todd Zalecki and Paul Casella of MLB.com, the Phillies could only make Mattingly's hiring official after his contract with the Blue Jays expired on December 31st. In other words, Toronto made a point of holding on to Don Mattingly until the very last possible day. And that caught the attention of people who know how this game works from the inside. Jim Bowden, former MLB GM and now a reporter for The Athletic, didn't swallow that decision. In his words, Mattingly is one of the classiest people in baseball. A professional who handled everything in a transparent, respectful, and straightforward way. So why make him wait? Why not simply pay out the remainder of the contract and let him move on? That's the question that echoed. And this is where the story stops being about Mattingly and becomes about the Blue Jays. Because when a team that just played in the World Series shows smallness in a human situation, that's a concerning signal. It's not illegal. It's not against the rules. But it's also not smart. In baseball, internal reputation matters. Coaches talk to each other. Executives make calls. Agents keep notes on everything. And decisions like this don't get forgotten. The official justification never really came with conviction. Toronto supposedly understood the situation and empathized with Mattingly's desire. But empathy that traps someone in bureaucracy isn't empathy. It's a cold contract. And that's where the conflict lies. The same Toronto that opened the vault for Dylan Cease couldn't open the door for Don Mattingly to leave a few days earlier. It seems small, but it isn't. Now let's put this into market context. Teams that are in all-in mode usually loosen the reins behind the scenes. Because they know every detail matters when the goal is to make deep playoff runs again. The Dodgers do this. The Braves do this. The Astros did it for years. Toronto wants a seat at that table. But at times, it still acts like an organization afraid of losing control. And excessive control usually comes at a cost. Mattingly wasn't just another bench coach. He was a bridge. A bridge between the coaching staff and veteran players. A bridge between the front office and the clubhouse. A bridge between external pressure and internal stability. Does age matter? Sure. He's 64. But experience at that level doesn't expire with a birth certificate. And even if his on-field impact in 2026 would have been minimal, the symbolism of the departure matters. Now look at it from the human side. A professional who just reached the World Series with the team. Who did his job. Who was honest about his next step. And still had to wait for the calendar to turn to move on with his life. It's not a scandal. But it's not a good look either. Around the league, it comes off as unnecessary rigidity. And here's the real comparison. It's like a company that knows an employee is leaving, has already trained the replacement, has already closed the cycle, but insists on holding them until the last day just to mark territory. What do you gain from that? Nothing. And what do you lose? Goodwill. Now, straight talk. What does each side gain and lose from this story? The Phillies gain an experienced, respected coach with a strong emotional connection to the organization. Mattingly gains the chance to work with his son and close out his career in an environment that makes personal sense. And the Blue Jays? They gain absolutely nothing by dragging out this process. On the contrary, they buy themselves unnecessary public criticism at a moment when they should be getting praise for their aggressive approach to the market. And does this change the team's future? Directly, no. But indirectly, yes. Because championship organizations learn quickly where they can afford to be flexible. Toronto is still learning. Expectations for 2026 remain high. The roster is strong. The rotation is deep. The lineup added new pieces. The goal is clear. But if the Blue Jays want to take the next step, they need to understand that winning isn't just about stacking talent. It's also about knowing how to deal with people. If you agree or disagree with this front office decision, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep following everything behind the scenes, the decisions, and what really impacts the Blue Jays' future, you already know what to do. Because in October, details like this come back to collect. They always do.